Hi, my name is Rich and I'm a recovering imposter. If only you knew.
Hi, Richard.
Hi. Who here has ever felt anxious about anything? All right, so those of you that raised your hands, you have a sense of what imposter syndrome feels like. Those of you that didn't, well, you're lying. Everybody feels it. Some of the catchphrases that kind of go with... Can't hear me?
No, Mike.
What? Some of the catchphrases that go along with imposter syndrome, and it's funny because when I've shared this with people, they've said to me, did I write these for you? No, because these are kind of universal catchphrases. I'm not good enough to be here. I'm not looking at you, Jeff Chandler. That's great. I'll never be as good as him or her. It's only a matter of time before someone finds out I'm a fraud. I'm not talented. I've just been lucky so far. So far, who here is sitting here going, holy crap, I've said that? Yeah, I know you can. I don't deserve this. Why would anyone care what I think? I don't know anything. I code / design / write whatever, but I'm not a real developer, designer, writer, whatever. I don't even have a degree in this field. How can I hope to compete? I managed to get this far through sheer dumb luck and managed to keep everyone from finding out I'm not great at programming. I know. You didn't write that.
No.
You couldn't. I know everyone clapped and congratulated me, but what do they really think? Any minute now, they're going to figure out I don't know what I'm doing. These are all things that people with imposter syndrome, which in this industry, I'm also a teacher, as an educator, we say these things constantly to ourselves. It's internalizing our fear of success. Imposter syndrome is the inability to internalize your success. It's a psychological phenomenon that arises from an incorrect assessment of one's own abilities compared to those of your peers. It instills an irrational fear of rejection that stops you from taking risks. It makes you afraid to speak up or ask questions because you are afraid of saying something stupid and that people would find out you really don't know anything. It's basically feeling like you're not worthy of the praise you get. Have you ever had someone say, thank you, and you replied, it was nothing? Even though it was hours of thought where you racked your brain for a long-lost memory. Why didn't you say, you're welcome instead? It's because somewhere deep down in your head, you were sure you didn't deserve it. This is what imposter syndrome is. Maybe before today you've never heard the term. Maybe you've heard it, didn't really understand it. I'm here to tell you, along with my friends up here, that a lot of us have it, and you're not the only one. And a big part of getting through it is understanding it and talking with others about it. So, to talk about it today, I wanted to introduce my friends here up on the panel. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves.
My name is Steve Grunwald, and I'm an imposter. I'm a senior web engineer at 10up. For those of you not familiar with 10up, we are a WordPress VIP partner. We do a lot of enterprise-level WordPress development, and I work with some of the best developers in the WordPress, nay, the programming world.
He's one of them, but he doesn't think he is.
That's me.
My name is Angela Bergman. I work for an international IT company called Volta Advisix in-house, doing their brand management, content, governance, and redeveloping their website. Imposter syndrome is a major issue that I deal with. I think we all deal with every day, especially being a woman in the IT field. It kind of exacerbates it. So talking here today, I think will help everybody else understand what they can do for it.
Help you too.
Yes.
My name is Jeff Chandler. I am a contributing writer to WP Tavern, which a few years ago, well, looking back on it now, at least six or 7 years ago, just a tiny blog about WordPress, and I helped grow into one of the largest publications devoted on the WordPress ecosystem And thanks to Dr. Rick over here, I found out I'm an imposter.
Yes, in fact, he was the one that, when I was going through the catchphrases with earlier, he's like, did I write these for you? I'm like, no. But he and I have had many times where we just sat there and talked, and he'd say things like that, so he helped inspire it. This is going to be an interactive conversation. I'm going to ask them questions, and for those of you that this is your first time at WordCamp, you heard the guys say this is not your standard tech conference. Normally there's a Q&A at the end because somebody wants to get through their presentation. There's no slides. This is a chat. Please don't hesitate to ask a question. Now we don't have microphones for you, so if you have a question, try to speak loudly. I'll repeat it just so everybody can hear it. But please don't hesitate, because imposter syndrome is one of those things that if you don't talk about it, you just keep building it up and building it up inside. So we're going to start with the discussion part of this now, but please, I just want to say, ask questions, interject, chime in. This is a conversation. We're not experts. We don't feel worthy, do we? We're imposters. A lot of you probably are too, just don't realize it. So please don't hesitate to interact. So I'm going to ask them some questions, and they're going to tell you their perspective and stories. Steve?
So formal.
Yes. Stephen, how do you describe imposter syndrome, and how does it manifest itself for you?
To me, imposter syndrome is feeling like you're the person in the room who somehow managed to get where you are, but you don't deserve it. It's not because you're skilled. It's not because you've worked hard and you've applied yourself and you've made the right decisions. It's, well, someone must not have been paying attention and somehow I've slipped through. And, I'm one mistake away from someone going, oh, maybe this guy isn't, who we think he is. Final answer.
And I'm going to push him a little further on his answer. He and I have chatted about it before, and he just started working with 10up, and he's working with some of the best developers there are in the WordPress community. I mean, Helen Husandi now is one of the lead developers for the whole project, and they've talked about houses and development and anything else. And
10up, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a totally distributed company, which means everyone's working out of their own home, where they might do a co-working space, but there's no central office where we all drive in and we go, hey, let's stand around the water cooler. So in order to stay connected, we use an application called HipChat. It's very similar to Slack, which is many of you have probably used if you've been working, contributing to WordPress core or anything. And through HipChat, you can have one-to-one conversations with anybody, as well as rooms based on different topics. And I've had conversations with Helen Husandi, with Drew James, the 4.2 release lead, and tons of other people just kind of shooting the shit. Really, hey, how are things going for you? Oh, I started roasting coffee and getting off on topics about that. And it's not talking about development, but here are these people who, before I started there, I had built them up as these icons in my mind, thinking like, oh, well, I could never be on their level. And now I'm talking about like, oh, what kind of beer do you like? And just having these real conversations, because we're all just people. It's not this person is better than me or this person's more skilled. We're all on our own paths, and they just might be a little further along on theirs.
like the slide up there said earlier, you said this to me, we'll put our pants on the same way, one leg at a time. I mean, I had a chat with Chris Lemma, for those of you who know him and have heard him speak. He and I chatted a few weeks ago about this, and he's like, Rich, I was really nervous to talk to Chris Lemma. And he said, Rich, I put my pants on the same way you do. So I mean, that phrase really does embody, everybody's kind of equal. Different skill sets, different things, but it doesn't mean we're not worthy.
So one of the issues, I guess it's an issue now that I know about it, is throughout my life, especially within the last few years, making WP Tavern successful, I have this issue where when anybody comes up to me and says, that was a great post you wrote, or I really enjoy your podcast, or I really enjoy what you're doing, my gut instinct is to put that success onto someone else. Like, well, that's just because I got lucky, or that's just because my coworker's carrying me, or something to that effect. And I thought it was just me being sort of, I think that's just me being a good guy, saying, hey, these people help me out, I'm successful because of this person and the work that they're putting in, when in reality, it's really, the success is a result of what I'm doing and how much work I'm putting into it. And I thought that was just it's a character trait of mine, something that is still one of my gut instincts to do. Like, you tell me, man, you're on top of the world, you're on one of the largest publications, and I just go, yeah, well, it's because this, and so, not because, well, yeah, I'm awesome at it.
Oh, I didn't go that far. But in fact, Jeff had asked me earlier when we were prepping for this about, well, what's wrong with, sharing credit with the team? And that's one of the things that, as an imposter, you tend to go, well, I have a great team. They did a lot of the work. You deflect it. I mean, Jeff will do that constantly. I mean, personally, we talk about things, and he'll do that. It's not just WordPress. It's a character trait. And there's nothing wrong with sharing credit with your team, but give yourself due credit at the same time. That's something I've been trying to hammer into Jeff's head for a while now about, you earned it.
So on the flip side of that conversation, what if on the opposite spectrum I start going on this ego trip? Like, at what point, when you start to accept your success and realize, yeah, I busted my ass, and this is again a result of it, take that, at what point does it become too much of the opposite part of the spectrum?
When people don't talk to you anymore. I mean, honestly, because that's what it is.
You'll know.
You'll know. Well, and I think one of the points that goes with it, too, is that there's a false assumption with something like imposter syndrome, and this was a discussion that we had. We're planning on doing this panel at a few other WordCamps. And because of that, some of us can't attend all of those because we have other obligations. Sorry, Steve. But we're trying to find people at those other WordCamps to fill in, and I have made a couple of recommendations, and the first thing he says is, I would never picture them having imposter syndrome. Everybody assumes that if you have imposter syndrome, you're quiet and you're shy and you're reserved.
She's not
I'm
shy,
the
quiet,
exact
reserved.
opposite. I suffer massively from imposter syndrome. I cover that up by being exceptionally outgoing and bubbly and energetic and excited. And that's just how I've learned to use that anxiety that you get, especially like public speaking. I take that anxiety and I turn it into energy instead. It took me years to figure out, well, I'm just scared to get up there because I think I'm an idiot. I'm not qualified to talk about this.
All those catchphrases, yeah.
Yeah, but I am because I know it. I think it's easy because I know it. And that's always my cover is, she would never have imposter syndrome. She gets up and she does public speaking and she's really loud and she's boisterous. No, it's just a cover.
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation Angie and I had last week. I call myself shy. My wife looks at me and goes, "You're not shy." and it took me until I started understanding that I had imposter syndrome, that I'm a recovering imposter. It took to that point to realize it wasn't about being shy. It was that I was overcompensating by being loud and charismatic. You don't overcompensate.
No, never.
But, I mean, Angie and I are very similar in that we overproject because we're so scared. We're so afraid of the rejection. And, well, at least if we're louder than everybody else, they'll hear us. It doesn't matter what we say. They'll hear us.
They'll hear us.
But that's not credibility. That's just compensation.
Exactly.
All right. We'll start with Jeff since he broke rank there. When did you first realize you had imposter syndrome? Besides when I told you.
The first time I realized it is, A, you told me, and B, I watched a presentation by Chris Lemma at one of the WordCamps. If you go to WordPress.tv and you type in imposter syndrome, it should be one of the first results you see on there. And as he described the symptoms, the things you say, it started to really, it was like you reading off all those phrases like, yeah, I wrote that. It's like, so I realized it then, but it's a never-ending battle. It's because it's so ingrained as to who I am in my character. And like I said, my gut instinct. It's a constant battle of trying to compete against it. But
You typically just compete against yourself.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's hard.
I would say that I probably figured out that I had imposter syndrome when I first got involved in the WordPress community. I'm one of the few people that's used WordPress for a significantly long period of time. I've used it since before it was WordPress. And I never got involved in the community because I thought I didn't have anything to add. I thought, well, I'm just a blogger who lucked into this job. I'm not good enough. And I sat with my husband because a couple of people were like, well, I went to a couple of meetups and they were like, you have a lot of knowledge, and you understand how to explain that to people. You should really consider talking at meetups and going to WordCamps and speaking because you're really good at getting on that level with people. And I was like, no, I'm just an idiot. They're going to think that I'm dumb. And my husband was like, why do you always sell yourself so short? You don't realize that because it's something you do every day and it's very easy for you, doesn't mean that it's easy for everybody else. And when I started attending WordCamps and I did a couple of talks and I saw people respond to it, I was like, well, maybe there is something like psychologically going on there that makes me think that I'm not good enough. Why can't that apply to my job and what I do as a hobby and for a living? Why, like you have self-esteem issues, you can have self-esteem issues about your job. Why doesn't that make sense? And I never knew until, like some of the WordPress talks I've seen about imposter syndrome, what it was actually called.
That it actually was
And
something.
it was, it actually is something. I'm like, well, I'm one of those few, and I'll just be quiet about it and not talk about it. No, talking about it has significantly helped overcoming it.
How much, before you go, I have to ask you, as the only woman on the panel.
Yes.
And we've talked about this, and it is an issue, but about being a woman in tech, and especially going all that way back when there was even fewer women in the industry.
It's
How much of
hard.
that really,
There's a lot of built-in fear because you have the assumption that men will think less of you because you're a woman. And I've experienced that. I haven't experienced that in this community, thankfully. This community is very, very, very accepting of women. But I have experienced it in other areas with tech, and it builds on it. It makes your imposter syndrome significantly worse. Because you also then are like, well, I can't say anything because I'm an idiot, and then I especially can't say something because I'm going to make other women look dumb. So it's a lot of pressure. But the only way you can change that male-dominated mindset and the mindset of men that think like that is by saying, no, I'm not an idiot and I know what I'm doing. Just because I'm asking you a question or I don't know about this small little portion of this that I'm asking for help with, doesn't mean that I don't know more than you in some other section. And you should respect me as a colleague.
Oh, let's see. First time with imposter syndrome would have been years before I would even hear the word or the phrase imposter syndrome. But it would be back in high school. Before jobs were even on my mind, I started doing the theater program. It was the second semester of my freshman year of high school. And a lot of people, in order to be part of the theater repertory where you're in like the big productions and stuff, my school had a really good program. You had to take the intro to theater class. And a lot of my friends took that the first semester of their freshman year. So by the spring, they were starting to be in plays and really, it's part of this group. And anyone here who was a theater kid now or in the past knows that can be a really tight-knit group. So to kind of come in later to it and be that outsider and kind of go, well, they're comfortable, being out in front of people and there's a certain level of vulnerability that comes with getting up on stage and being in front of someone. So to deal with everyone else just very comfortable with it because they all went through the intro class together and then they were out, we're in plays. And me going, oh, well, I also, I want to do that, but I'm not as good and I'm not as confident. And I can't deliver the lines, but I can. As I stutter. Speaking and being in front of people, it's all it's a mindset. You just have to focus on getting your message across and having fun while you're doing it. So eventually I was able to feel comfortable within my theater group, but of course that changes every year. New people come in, you have younger people than you who they're fighting imposter syndrome, but then they're just like, they're killing it on stage, and you're like, why are they better than me? They're younger, they should be freaking out and nervous, why am I behind? So then you start getting it on both sides, the people who have been doing it longer than you, the people who have been doing it a shorter time than you, and you feel like you can't compare to either of those. Then as I moved on and started my professional career, every time I've changed jobs, it's someone does things a little differently,
Yeah.
and suddenly you're like, oh, you're using this stack. I've never worked with that. How I got hired for this job and I'm not going to be able to do this, but you discount the fact that you can learn things. It's not that hard. I mean, if you really sit down and you go, oh, I need to learn X, you go, let's find some good resources on X, and let's read, and let's talk to people, and let's go to conferences about X, and let's get that good understanding, and then suddenly someone's asking you questions about that topic, and you're like, oh, well, you just do this, and you realize, oh, I guess I do know X. I've gotten myself to the point that someone sees me as an authority on that topic. And that's a fantastic feeling, but guess what? Y comes next, and then Z, and I really should have started earlier in the alphabet because it really just, it keeps going. So we'll go into AA, BB.
It never ends.
And they really think I'm so much better than I actually am. I really don't.
Oh, they promoted me and put senior in my title. Someone must have been hitting the sauce on
Find out
that.
on.
Throwing in my own personal story, I never realized I was an imposter. I need a shirt. We need to create shirts. But I look back at high school and, thinking about what you were saying about the theater and stuff. And I grew up in New York City, and I went to a specialized math and science school, the geek school. And you had a test to get in, and it was really hard to get in. And I was amazed that I got into that school. Now, I didn't have the kind of upbringing where, do your studies, it's important. But I had one of those lifestyles and family settings that it wasn't very pride-inspiring. So school was important. I knew I had to graduate and go to college. But when I got into this great high school, all of a sudden I'm with people that I'm the dumbest kid in the class. I knew it. I knew I had to be. And it's funny, I look back now at some of the people that I went to high school with, and they're some freaking geniuses. I mean, they've gone to Harvard, teach at Harvard, so many people in my graduating class, 800 people in my graduating class, and I'd probably say a good 300-400 did the Ivy League thing, got PhDs, and I look back at that, and I'm like, I set myself up to not do good. I pulled off a 3.3 GPA. I could have done good, and I only went to half my classes. I was cutting class all the time because I didn't think I was smart enough to go, and I didn't want to compete. And I look back at them and I'm like, I had imposter syndrome back then because there's no reason I couldn't have gone to one of the good schools, one of the good colleges, and done what they did. And even now I'm sitting here getting embarrassed just thinking about it. And that's that anxiety. I'm sitting here, and it's not because I'm talking to you. I don't talk about this publicly because I don't think my story's worthy. You're seeing a theme here with the whole, we don't think it's worthy. I hope some of you are seeing that you experience that too, but I've had it since high school. I have it to this day. What?
You said I'm not worthy.
Yeah, I'm not worthy. And that's a common theme. Those words are an easy catchphrase for it, but it's all of these different emotions. And when we talk about when we first knew it, and the next thing I'm going to ask them is how they cope with it. How do you cope with it? But to just identify you have it. I look back, and even before high school, and I look at Angie and I were trading stories about dating, and oh my God, why would she want to go out with me? And it manifests itself in. I want to talk about Angie.
That would just take close to home. That's high school.
Yeah.
That's pretty much most of my adult life, and that's imposter syndrome. That's personal and professional. It's not just if you're sitting behind a computer writing code or you're a project manager and you're writing up business proposals. It doesn't matter. And it's not just WordPress. It's not just tech. And this isn't a tech talk. This isn't a WordPress talk. This is a human feeling talk that manifests itself especially in this community. So I've been an imposter all my life, and made him almost cry just now. But yeah, I look back like, darn it, I wish I would have understood this sooner, because maybe I could have started coping with it better.
You see it so much, I think, in tech too, especially in, like, say, the WordPress community, because this community as a whole, while there are degrees that relate to it, the majority of us are almost 100% self-taught. We can all go out and get a degree in computer science or graphic design or marketing or whatever, but to learn WordPress, they're starting to have classes for it, but the majority of what you learn is going online and Googling. And a lot of our job is spending our day Googling how to fix problems, how to code this, how to make this work. And I think that feeds that sense of imposter syndrome. Well, I don't have a degree, so I'm not good enough. I have to go to Google to figure out what line of code and why this error is here. And it really feeds that sense that you don't know what you're doing. Well, what it turns out is those people that you put on that pedestal as being so much better at your job than you are doing the exact same thing you're doing.
Yeah.
Before we talk about coping with it, I just wanted to ask the panel, are you consciously aware of any opportunities that you've been given in life that you know you didn't have it, that you didn't take because of the imposter syndrome?
That's one of our questions, Jeff.
Who's moderating who?
Darn, you hijack it.
Good job.
We'll talk about that in a little bit, because
All right.
that's a part of it.
All right.
I want to talk about the coping, or the inability to cope, or just the daily battle, and how you guys just get past your fears, get past your insecurities, and I mean, I was about to say something really bad. Well, you work for 10 Up, so you really have the people you work with. But I mean, it's all of us. And something Angie said about with WordPress, the fact that it's open source software, everybody else is seeing what we're doing. So you can't hide. So the stuff Steve's doing, at 10 Up, I mean, all of us, each of our own contributions. Jeff, and when he's talking on his podcast or when he's writing a blog post, he's constantly facing himself saying, oh, this post sucked, I got to do it over again. How many times do you redo it? So how do you guys cope with that?
So, you want to start? All right. One of my favorite movies is Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story. It's a highly underrated movie, but it is really good, especially if you love music from like the 50s through the 70s.
They're not mocking you. Maybe.
And John C. Reilly is a national treasure. And I don't even remember if the line made it into the final movie or not, but it was in the trailers, and it stuck with me. And it's Dewey Cox at the beginning of his real professional career as a musician, and he gets up there and he's like, "Hi, my name's Dewey Cox, and it looks like I got some proving myself to do." And I really like Judd Apatow movies, I'm sorry. No, you know what? I make no apologies for that. But that kind of idea of, taking all this fear and uncertainty and doubt, FUD, for those of you familiar with the term, and channeling that into, okay, this is a challenge. There are people watching me, whether they actually are or not. And I feel like I have to prove myself to them. So you can either sit there and you can beat yourself up about it, or you can go, okay, screw it. Let's do it. I can get past this. And if it means, I'm spending a weekend rather than, let me go out and party with friends, it's let me learn how to do this so I can put this thing up on GitHub so then I can tweet about it and someone will be like, a casual throwaway. I released a plugin back in November just after starting at 10 Up called Son of Clippy. If any of you have seen it, I know Kyle has.
It's awesome.
No, it's a terrible plugin. If you remember Clippy, the little paperclip office assistant from like old-ish editions of Microsoft Word, hi, it looks like you're trying to write a form letter. Want some help? There's a library called Clippy.js, and I decided I'm going to take that and make a WordPress plugin. So it doesn't really do anything other than add this stupid stupid paperclip. It was like, looks like you're trying to write a post, want some help? Looks like you're trying to write a page, want some help? And you can dismiss it. And I found out there's a whole API inside it, so I could say, okay, when WordPress is auto-saving, trigger the save animation on the stupid paperclip. And you can change it out, use the dog or the wizard. That doesn't matter. I wrote it as a gag. And I probably spent 12 hours working on this stupid plugin that accomplishes nothing. And I did it as a joke because Eric Mann, one of my coworkers, was saying like, well, we should probably, there was an actual client thing where it's like, well, the client's having some problems with some of the publishing because of their unique editorial necessities. And someone else was like, yeah, they should probably make like Clippy for WordPress. And I'm like, ah.
Who got credit for the author for the plugin?
So then Eric's like, Steve, you should probably build that. So I did, and I credited Eric Mann. If you go on wordpress.org/plugin/sun-of-clippy, there are two authors listed, myself and Eric Mann, who contributed 0 lines of code. And didn't find out about it until someone was like, Eric, what have you done? And went, you didn't actually work on this, did you?
So Steve copes by making crap plugins.
I troll people. But it was a way to kind of, it got people at 10 Up to kind of go, oh, hey, it's that Steve guy who makes stupid plugins.
What's the other stupid plugin? I mean, the other plugin?
You'll need to be more specific.
Oh, wait, that wasn't you. That was somebody else that made a crappy plugin.
Oh, well, thank you. So by channeling all that fear and are people going to think I'm worthy, I've always found that humor works really well. I tend to do a lot of self-deprecating humor, which isn't a good thing. That can be a real slippery slope. But finding ways to make people laugh. I've gotten some great laughs out of you guys just in the last few minutes. And I feel much more comfortable around you because it's like, we're laughing together. And rather than going, okay, here's me on the stage and I'm nervous about feeling like, I'm worthy to talk to a room full of people that have imposter syndrome. Instead, it's a connection and I'm not feeling as threatened now. And I hope you guys feel more comfortable and
They
hopefully
put
less
their pants
bored.
on one leg at a time too, right?
We're all wearing pants, Rich. We're past that.
I'm sure somebody out there's not wearing pants.
Well, some sort of garments.
We're going down a slippery slope. Let's not talk about it.
So humor and putting things out there that are ways to prove myself that are disguised as jokes.
Disguise, that's the big part. You don't want to take full credit for it just in case. You tend to disguise it.
Right, because then I can write it off as,
They're not going to like it. Why would, yeah.
But seriously, it's a terrible plugin. It has last time I checked, 5-star reviews on WordPress.org, and they're both, and one of them was Kyle over there. Basically going, this is the greatest plugin ever. This WordPress without Sun and Clippy. No.
Let's get Sun and Clippy trending.
Or let's keep it down.
All right.
To cope, I started reminding myself that what's the worst thing that happened the last time I failed at something? That's honestly the very best, and that's the best way I found to cope, where I actually listen to myself. I'm like, well, I really screwed up that time, and nothing bad happened. Nobody died. No, I didn't get fired. I redid my company's website like 3 years ago, and I think every developer's worst nightmare is that you put a wrong phone number on the website. I did that. It was a porn line. Yeah, I transposed the numbers, and my boss comes in and he's like, I need you to call the 1-800 number at the top right corner of the website. And I was like, okay. And he goes, no, I need you to dial it exactly like it is on the website. Oh God, I'm so sorry. And he was like, it's fine, just fix it. He's like, luckily the client that called has a really good sense of humor. It was just like, I hope you guys know.
you're answering my next question about when did you feel like the biggest fraud or what was the biggest thing, so thank you.
That's my moment of, that's my oh my God moment. You know what though? He didn't fire me. He was like, everybody makes a mistake. He's like, if the client was really upset about it, we would just be like, look, we made a mistake. I owned it. I was like, yeah, that was all me. And nothing bad happened. So any time that I really feel like I'm starting to be affected by it, I think about that. I'm like, he didn't fire me. The worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to say no.
I think you touched on something really important when you said that you owned it.
Yes.
Because when you make mistakes, and they happen to everybody, it doesn't matter if, Andrew Nason has made mistakes.
Yes.
Those of you new to WordPress, he's one of the lead developers, and people tend to go, really nice guy too. But when you make a mistake and you're willing to say, yeah, I messed up and I'm going to learn from it and not do that again, that goes a lot further with people than, yeah, it must have just been something, some sort of bug, and but it wasn't me. I can promise you it wasn't me. Because then you are an imposter. Because then you're lying to not only yourself, but you're lying to everyone around you. So when you make the mistakes, own them and recognize that error is human. And really, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad. I mean,
Yeah.
the porn phone number.
That's pretty bad. I mean, it could have been worse. It could have been worse. But yeah, that's one of those nightmare situations. My face got red. I started sweating. My hands are shaking. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
So both of you are saying you pretty much keep that benchmark of your biggest.
Yeah, definitely. My biggest mess up.
That helps kind of put things in perspective.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And then I also think back too, like, I've presented at a few WordCamps now, and people always have questions. And they always respond really well to my talks. And I think about those things, and I'm like, well, people actually do want to hear what I have to say. So I must know something. Like, I'm not this idiot that I think that I am. So you can use this, like, once you've forced yourself out of your comfort zone, and you really start to try to work through it, you have things that will help build and keep you moving away from self-degradation. You'll do it anyways, because we all do, no matter what, no matter how awesome we are. But having those things that will really just keep you going and going, no, I got accepted to talk, and I did that talk, and I helped these people, and I did that awesome project, and you just build up on those things. Even if it's literally having a physical list of things to remind yourself that you did, and give yourself credit for it, is huge.
Oh, me?
That's still here.
So, sort of similar to depression, I go through peaks and valleys, most of the time valleys. There's days where I recognize imposter syndrome and I try and do what I can to not get myself involved there, and there's other days where I'm so nonchalant about it that I feel like I'm slipping back into the void. But one way I cope with it is to be public about it. Be public in the way I'm thinking about myself and the way I feel, because in the WordPress community, since so many people have this and have already traveled down the path and are doing a much better job at handling the situation, there is a lot of positive reinforcement in the WordPress community. And I've spoken with Rick here numerous times in person, and he's constantly reminding me about the good job I'm doing and the hard work I'm doing, and it's almost like we're in a constant battle of, would you quit saying it, quit saying it's not true.
Yeah,
but
I mean, he gets mad at me for trying to give him credit.
Yeah, so
wait, let me toot his horn a little bit. Just for those of you that don't know Jeff Chandler, and this is going to go to actually serve some of, making you feel better, but WP Tavern is, well, why don't you describe the tavern and the podcast real quick? I mean, we're starting to get close on time, so don't go down too far.
describe it how.
What do you do?
Well,
Because there's a lot of people, this is a good avenue to talk about this.
So free plug.
Yeah,
So,
do it.
so the Tavern is a publication where I try and write 2 articles a day. Writing every day is really hard, especially on the same subject, so I write about that every day. And then every Wednesday night I record a live podcast about WordPress that lasts an hour long. Is that short enough?
Shorter than I was thinking, but okay. Usually the, many words of Jeff last a lot longer, but, so part of why I wanted him to do that was Jeff's very public. Jeff's a very public figure. When I met him, I'm like, oh my God, that's Jeff Chandler. Look how many people follow him on Twitter, how many people subscribe to the podcast, and it blew me away when he was an imposter. It blew me away, Chris Lemma and David Bissett and all these other important people that, kind of like what you said about Helen.
Well, I got so many people that I meet at work camps that say, I love your show, you do an awesome job, and I go, thanks, I think it's great.
And he tweets things like that. And it drives me nuts because I send him a text message. I don't even do it on Twitter. Dude, what are you doing? And so he struggles to cope with it on a daily basis and publicly. And that I think is actually more therapeutic because you're at least talking about it. I mean, I hope after today, this is our first time we've done this panel. Hopefully after today, maybe Jeff, I think Jeff suffers it from the worst of all of us, and publicly especially. And hopefully Jeff will see maybe a little bit that you're worthy.
We love you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, we actually are running late, so we have those questions. I don't know if you guys want to freeform a little bit here. We can talk about the biggest fraud thing, or if you want to freeform, or I'll even throw it out to you guys. I mean, at this point, you've heard our stories, like I say, and it's not just you, and I'm hoping that you guys are getting that, and we can continue to talk about it, but I really want to hear you guys talk about it, because that's helped us. I mean, that helped create this panel, was us talking about it. Well, no, nobody wants to hear that, and things like that. So please, tell us what you're thinking. Ask your questions. I know you have one.
How do you deal with, and maybe this is another symptom of the imposter syndrome, with your family is maybe middle class or working class, and they create tangible objects, but you're doing this internet thing, and it's this intangible thing.
I have no idea.
Right, what she asked was, and I'll try to paraphrase it, is we create things that tend to be non-tangible, but yet our families, especially, you talk about Ohio's blue-collar state, hard-working state, and you don't have a huge technology involvement here as much as a lot of other areas. So I think generally you see a lot of people can appreciate the intangible product that we put out there. That's just a website, or it's just this, and how do we cope with our families feeling that way? And I mean, I'm lucky my wife's a geek too, so she gets it, but try to talk to my in-laws and my dad, and what? There's no clue. So what do you guys think?
I grew up in a lower class family, and because of that, a lot of them are factory workers doing tangible objects. I deal with them honestly the same way that I deal with my small business clients, because they assume, since it's not a tangible item, that it's not as valuable. So and that kind of goes right over to the family too, who doesn't understand the importance of your job. And I love to grab a piece of paper, and I'm like, okay, this is my job, this is how easy it is. I need you to draw me a logo that's as good as Coke's logo. Here's a pen, here's a paper, I need a logo, and you've got about half an hour.
And I'll give you $10 for it.
Or, they're like, well, all you're doing is writing. And I'm like, well, here we go. Write me a book. I need it tomorrow, but I need you to write me a book. And they kind of seem to at least understand at some point, well, they can't physically understand my job. They get that there's a value there, because they can't just create a logo. One of my aunts looked at me, she's like, you want me to draw something? I was like, well, yeah, it's so easy. Just do it. It's easy, right? And it kind of makes them actually step back and think and go, might not be able to actually understand it, but I see where you're coming from and how that might have value for other people. Or I just show it to them. I've broken out my laptop and opened Notepad and said, can you do this? I really love to see you. And then watch what this does. And I've showed them, you don't understand how to write this to make this website do this, but this is what I do. There's a value there. I can't physically hold it, but somebody's going to interact with this. and then do business with somebody else because of it.
Anybody else want to throw anything in there? We got 5 minutes left, so.
I like that. Techie family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you had.
Hey everybody, my name's Jeremy. I'm an imposter. And
First up,
this talk is great for me because this is what I live every day.
We talked about it out there. a
Yeah,
little
we
bit.
talked about it outside, or out there. And, I have to get in the car and drive for 2 hours to talk to somebody that does WordPress. Nobody I know does anything like this, so I fight this every day. But even though it's like your greatest enemy, it's also your best friend. At least that's how I do it. And, you get that imposter feeling, like you don't know what you're doing, and if somebody looked at your code, you would be laughed out of the room, so to speak, or literally. And you get that panic feeling. And that's like, I use it as my best friend to go harder forward, to mess up even better, to mess up even more. That's how I deal with it. Sounds like that's how you guys deal with it too. So.
Just wait till you get to a point where you have to do code reviews, where someone not only is looking at what you built overall, but like scrutinizing line by line, and that's, oh geez. We do them at 10 up, and I'm like, this is not good.
And I assume when that day ever happens, I'll get my ass beat. So.
It takes thick skin, but they're definitely useful, and they open your eyes to the things. And a good code review is not just here's what you did wrong, but also here's what you did really well. It's important to have that level of reinforcement and keep people enthusiastic and recognizing, oh, I have done well here. I found that of people who criticize you, they typically fall into 2 camps. You have the people who are, whether they mean to come across, or whether they come across nicely and make it seem like constructive criticism or not. You have the people who are trying to help you. They want to say, hey, you could have done this better, you made a mistake here. Even if they say, hey, you really screwed this up and now the client's angry and whatever, that's still positive in the sense of they're saying you made a mistake and it's an opportunity to learn from it. Then you have the other people, the people who are saying, hey, you suck.
No.
And that's it. And those people aren't worth your time.
Yeah.
They're called trolls, and the first rule of the internet is do not feed the trolls.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, and there's been a lot of that lately. I think we're out of time. We're pretty much out of time. What I'm going to offer to everybody here is, if you want to talk about this, talk about it. Come up to one of us afterwards. You have all of our information's on the website for WordCamp. Twitter. We all have our personal links on there, I think. I mean, please don't hesitate to ask. Borrowing once again from Chris Lemma, because he's kind of the person that really kickstarted this for me a year ago, and then having had personal chats with him about it. And I have to read this because I don't feel confident enough, because I don't believe I could repeat Chris Lemma's words because I'm not worthy. So I'm going to read some of what he's done in the presentation and some of what he's taught when he and I have had one-on-one conversations. If you're dealing with imposter syndrome, getting past it starts by being honest about it and talk about it. Getting perspective. Find friends who can be honest about what you're good at. Talk about it. Enter into a public discussion about it. Ask more questions. Stop worrying about looking lame. Help others. That's why we're here. Keep track of your accomplishments. I think Lemma puts in one of his presentations about having a LinkedIn profile. No, not because it's a great social network, but because you're forced to document your accomplishments.
It's a list of wins.
Yeah, I mean, it's an undeniable, tangible list of your accomplishments. Write it down. And the last thing that he said to me personally, which really kind of caught me that he has to do this, and look up Chris Lemma if you haven't yet, but it amazed me that he does this. Stop worrying. Just deal with one item at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, like preparing for this talk. Just focus on the next hour. Don't worry about it, just focus on it and do it. Sometimes it helps also to just listen instead of trying to talk through something. Figure out the reality of the situation that you're in instead of jumping to the worst case scenario automatically. You know, the horn phone number. You know, it might be an issue, it might not. You could be stressing about something that's not an issue. Well, we've kind of all said the same things that Chris Lemon had said in what we were talking about, and my little bullet point list here kind of embodies it. Talk about it, acknowledge it, listen, share, learn. WordPress is an open community. We love to help each other and talk to each other. That's why we have word camps. That's why Nate and the whole team putting this together. This is a community, and we do help each other. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with WordPress. So please, don't hesitate to talk about it. Reach out to us. Don't suffer. A lot of you are. I know it because I'm an imposter. Thanks, everybody.